Hello, my name is Pamela Cone. I'm the founder and CEO of Amity Advisory, a consultancy that works with professional service firms around social impact and sustainability. I'm very pleased to host today a podcast on behalf of Buying Legal Counsel in celebration of social impact and sustainability. My special guest today is Timothy Wilkins, Global Partner for Client Sustainability for Freshfields. I find his title intriguing, and I'm so excited to learn more about how Freshfields sees ESG and how they're working with clients around these topics. So Timothy, welcome so much to the podcast today.
Thank you, Pam. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm very curious to hear, it's my understanding that your role was established approximately a year ago. And I think Freshfields was the first to establish such a partner level role to focus on client sustainability. So tell me why the firm made that decision, why now, and how it's going.
Sure, thank you very much. It's quite exciting that the firm decided to make this move. We, I think, very typical of law firms, always try to follow our clients and see what is the essential needs that clients are having at particular times. And as a global law firm, we appreciate in particular this role of being a trusted advisor across various jurisdictions. And it was quite clear to us that we had various lawyers in our firm practicing in areas that could fall underneath the sustainability umbrella. So areas such as environmental law or corporate governance or finance, for that matter, on green bonds. But what we had seen with our clients was that the sustainability issue had really moved squarely in the boardroom, such that it had become a strategic issue that was going to clients' basic corporate strategy of how they presented themselves into the market. And that is really across, all of their key stakeholders. So certainly employees were caring deeply about sustainability issues and how they operated. They had their customers looking to see if they were really truly green companies to decide whether they would buy. Their suppliers wanted to know that when they shifted their goods through their supply chains, and these are global supply chains, were they being done in a sustainable way? But quite interesting, a big part of the push has been from investors, where investors were starting to recognize that those corporates who were truly sustainable, who could present a business plan that would last for not just the next fiscal quarter and the stock market returns, but for years and years, that they needed to integrate their strategy. And so we at Freshfields thought, why not have a partner to show the commitment that the firm had in bringing all of their resources from practice groups and sector areas across jurisdictions to see if we could deliver to the clients this type of integrated, sustainable approach that we saw the clients themselves doing.
I love hearing you say that, for many of your clients, this topic and this important initiative is moving into the boardroom, because I think historically so many companies and law firms and others have felt like social impact and sustainability was a nice little green volunteer committee that met quarterly and really had nothing to do with the running of the business. And I think that's totally evolving, which is wonderful. So share with me, if you can, some of the initiatives that you're engaged with around your new role, where you are adding unique value to the agenda, sustainability agenda of your clients.
Sure, and Pam, I love how you're asking that question about unique value, because we know that clients have other advisors in this general space. And so when we decided to structure having a full-time sustainability initiative, we thought, what is it that lawyers add to the conversation that will be relevant, certainly for the general counsel's office, but also a way that that general counsel's office gets involved in the strategic discussions with the CFO and the CEO. And so we thought really it's approaching the issue on 3 dimensions. One is thinking about what is the advisory work where you're providing the legal analysis, which as unfortunately most legal analysis entail, it's a thoughtful discussion about the risks involved in the choices that companies make. I think that really goes to the heart of sustainability. But then we also recognize this is a fast-moving area in the law, in society, in business. We're seeing things produced all the time, and we wanted to be a thought leader in this area as well. And then we also recognize that a lot of clients are wanting to tackle some very big problems that they don't necessarily see that they could tackle on their own. And so we thought that we could play a special role as a law firm in bringing clients across different sector groups and practice groups together, also with government officials as they're starting to push this agenda. So the basic approach has been to say, let's think about doing client advisory work, thought leadership, and impact collaboration. And if I can just give you a couple of concrete examples to show how that would work.
Yes, because that was going to be my next question. Give me some examples.
Perfect, perfect. So on the client advisory side, it's not going to surprise you that a lot of our clients are thinking about issues around climate change. So we've done advisory pieces for clients thinking about all of the risks connected with climate change. So part of climate change work may be just advising a client on a renewable energy project where they're making an acquisition. So we're using our M&A expertise, but we're also giving them the legal advice related to the regulatory issues in acquiring these type of assets. Another one, just pure advisory on human rights. So when you're looking through your supply chain, as one of our clients was doing, they had a lot of concerns about, are we sure that there's not human trafficking involved, or child labor, or potential modern slavery? And so we did an analysis for them, letting them know where the hard law, we call it, so clear regulatory issues that have been coming up in the human rights space, whether it's the UK Modern Slavery Act or the California Transparency Act in supply chain, but also looking at the soft law that is the various NGOs out there who are reporting appropriately so on potential violations that customers want to know about. So we did a heat mapping legal risk analysis for this client so that they could be proactive at making their supply chain a lot more productive, but without the human rights violations. And just a couple of more ones on the sustainable finance area. Here, there are so many more creative ways of financing structures beyond what would typically be the green bond offerings. So green bonds, as you know, are just, you have to use the proceeds to do a green specific project. But there are now these sustainability linked loans where lenders will say, just because you are a sustainable company and hitting certain of your targets, we will move the interest rate up or down depending if you hit those targets. So we'll lend you money. You can do anything you want with the funds, but we then will check and see what are those targets that you as a business strategically are trying to hit. And then we will reward you or punish you if you don't make those targets. So these are the type of creative ways now that through legal contracts and structures, acquisitions, that you see sustainability infused in those offerings.
And thank goodness, right? I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it feels like businesses are finally starting to wake up to being sustainable, not just in the green sense, but in the how do we make sure we have a viable business for the future generations, for the economy, and for the world. It's not just a here and now or quarterly returns.
Oh, so Pam, that's such, I'm sorry. I was just going to agree with that. And one of the things that's interesting is to see how laws and regulations are now trying to marshal more funds and resources to that purpose. So we're all familiar with these sort of ESG funds that are growing and doing well, but we just got hired by the UNEP Environmental Program and the UNPRI, which is the Principles for Responsible Investment, to look at, can we have mainstream investing, that is the big pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds who control trillions of dollars, to be able to give them the confidence that the law and the regulations allow them to manage their portfolios for a different definition of financial return than the typical quarterly return that can be beneficial to the beneficiaries, but also beneficial to society as a whole. So I really like, Pam, how you describe that, because that is the ultimate goal.
And how have clients received this new thought process, this new thought leadership from Freshfields?
So it's really encouraging, because this is one of those examples that you get to link arms with your client, because the clients have wanted to find ways that, you know, they can more closely connect with all the stakeholders. I'm sure you're aware that the Business Roundtable produced that report that talked about multi-stakeholder capitalism. And this type of advisory work for them helps them to come back to their board of directors and say, yes, here's how investors are benefiting, but here's how our employees, our suppliers, our customers are also benefiting. And the world is still quite confusing, just to be very straightforward, because the law hasn't hardened yet around this. So, for example, around the whole disclosure issue, all companies know that if it's a material issue and it involves something in an ESG context, they will have to disclose it. But companies often do produce ESG reports or a whole slew of data for the various sustainability indices out there, because they know that investors do care on how they're approaching what they think is relevant. But companies are often, overwhelmed with the type of small questions that get asked them that may not go to core strategy. And so that's a lot of the work we do also, is try to help advise them on how they can improve with sustainability indices, but also make sure they're always consistent with their own corporate strategy.
So how do you think the COVID pandemic is affecting your work, affecting clients' perceptions of ESG?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because what we did find is that our clients have taken this moment to pause and to think through what really is important to them. John Goldstein, who's the head of sustainable finance at Goldman Sachs, I saw a quote that he had that said, basically, this virus is a stress test for the field. The stuff that has been being done more for appearances or a label is getting, as he put it, constructively rationalized. In other words, clients can't just sort of do, you know, the cliche word of greenwashing. It has to be something that's going to their core strategy and, you know, worth the investment. And what is really interesting is here is where that government and private industry wedding is going to have to take place, because already in Europe, we've seen, they said, we're about to pour trillions of dollars into the economy. Shouldn't we be pouring it into those industries, companies that are sustainable for the long term, for the future? And so they're being very proactive about the regulation involved. I think in the US, we may be unlikely to see in the short term that type of a regulatory framework about the financial spend, but investors are certainly thinking long and hard about which, you know, chips they put down for which companies. So what we're seeing is some very concrete plans being put in place to make sure that these companies are ready for the next shock, which, you know, we kind of know will be coming. We knew there'd been a lot of conversations about a potential virus strike. We also know that climate change is going to be happening. So I think investors are signaling to corporates right now that we want to invest on those companies that are ready to handle the next shock. And companies are saying we are only going to put our resources towards those sustainability ventures that are going to yield the type of return for all our stakeholders that we need.
Yeah, I think your point about greenwashing is spot on. I liken it to, we now know whether companies' social impact and sustainability programs were window dressing or were they the real McCoy? Because the decisions that companies are making during these hard times are evidence of whether it was just marketing fluff, window dressing, or whether it was core to their business. And we're seeing it all over.
Sure, that's right.
I also like your comment about, you know, not just investors, but in some countries, the regulatory framework and the governments are actually making investments with climate change in mind. And the French government offered financial assistance to Air France, but it's contingent on their meeting certain climate targets. That makes perfect sense.
That was really a powerful, very clear message, wasn't it?
I think it'll be a while before we see that in the US, but that's exactly the sort of leadership that this opportunity, this pause, as you called it, is giving us and giving businesses. It's time to think about that. What do you think the long-term impact, and we're touching on this a little bit, but what do you think the long-term impact of COVID will be on corporate behavior?
On corporate behavior with respect to sustainability, I think sometimes it is helpful to separate out that E, S, and G. So on the E side, I think it's quite interesting, and I love the fact that you said long-term, because there could be a sense that, wow, oil is negative, whatever it is per barrel, that all these renewable projects could potentially go out the window. But what we're seeing, at least, is the type of capital investment that has already been made and is under planning. So for example, if you invest in a wind farm, that money is in the ground, and then it doesn't take any additional money to run it. You just have to wait for the wind to blow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I am a lot more bullish than I think some people who had worried that the low oil price might price out some of the real closing in the financial cost gap that we've seen between solar, wind, and oil. But I think that companies have already gone that way. So I think you are going to see that type of investment for the long future. The S is quite interesting too, because as a matter of social impact, and one of the things that I've been very proud that our clients are quite concerned about is our clients have done a lot on the diversity and inclusion perspective, making progress in their companies and in the boardrooms. And there's no doubt you can't see that the disparate impact on Black and ethnic minority communities in particular, and low income communities broadly, was devastating by the virus. And for corporates to start thinking differently about their diversity and inclusion programs, which, you know, when you look at what Robert Reich describes the four classes as, you know, the remotes, the essentials, the unpaid, and the forgotten. The remotes, you know, from a diversity point of view, has always been underrepresented for people of color, and then overrepresentation, as we're seeing clearly in the essentials, unpaid, and forgotten in prisons and the like. And so what I think is going to happen is we're going to see corporates over the long term restructuring programs to be broader in more systematic change, and recognizing that that investment in the communities in which they work is essential for their long-term survival, because if the community goes down, as we're seeing in this crisis, then so does the company.
Yep.
So that's going to be a big one. And then just finishing up on the G, from a governance point of view, I think that really this issue about disclosure, where we've always, you know, gone around and said it's kind of a nice to have. I like how, Pam, you had framed it in the beginning about, you know, some of these responsible business programs being sideshows. I think people are now going to appreciate that disclosing what your vulnerability is to potential health issues for your employees, for example, or issues in your supply chain, when those get disrupted, the whole business can come to a halt. And so I think there's going to be a lot more disclosure on the governance side that's going to really give investors a much clearer picture of really how stable and, you know, future-proof is the best word, those companies are.
Okay, this is great. I could probably talk to you for hours. Final question, give me your perspective on, is the legal industry as a profession, in-house and at law firms, are we doing enough around ESG issues to help our clients, to help our communities, to help our employees?
Well,
that's a big question.
I have to say we're not doing it enough, otherwise I might lose my job. We absolutely want to do more. I think, to be honest, the one advice I would give, and especially people in-house, is appreciating how central these issues really can be. And one of the great things that you often hear of the best general counsels are those who are not just the naysayers, but are actually working with companies to think through strategy. And I think that sometimes law firms and in-house lawyers get the bad rap around sustainability as being the ones who are always too cautious. So for example, if we really disclose that we might have issues in our supply chain, because we're actually trying to fix those issues, that could open us up to all sorts of litigation. And I do appreciate, believe me, especially with my US hat on, that, you know, there are eager plaintiffs everywhere, lurking around every corner.
Yes.
But I do believe that law firms in-house can help work on where those places that we can push the envelope safely and actually make progress, that will help the companies which we are advising and working for get through this in a more successful way.
I think you're absolutely right. I commend you and applaud Freshfields for their foresight in embracing this and being another resource to your clients around these topics. Thank you for blazing the trail. Thank you for joining us for our podcast today. And thank you to all of our listeners. I'm very, very happy that you were able to join us today, Timothy. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Pam. What a delightful conversation. Thank you.